Welcome to the second episode of Tree and Julia Community Culture. In this episode, we interview our friend CJ, who is awesome. He is super smart. He studied radically sustainable infrastructure. He is like this crazy encyclopedia of knowledge and adds so much credibility to our entire operation.
And also he's learned how to organize community through helping facilitate the biggest orgy in the world. So CJ is a hell of a guy. We've been on this TV show together. You might have just seen him in the latest episode. We've also partied at Burning Man, and he's a great friend of ours.
We had such a good conversation. I think this is a really good start off first interview. We talk about, the network of communities and the feasibility of that in the future. We talk about a lot of like hard topics about community that are sometimes hard to talk about, but I think there's a lot of talking points that are kind of presented in the show that just aren't elaborated on. And so we kind of like break all that down. I also address the scary ending of that last episode where I say things about Tyler in the van. I'm not going to say that was editing. That is absolutely something I said, but I think it actually brings up a lot of important topics about how we add people to the community and why it's such an important discussion, and we get into that in this episode as well.
I would just like to say in advance, sorry for the quality of the audio and the video. We're still figuring this all out. Didn't seem like the audio was that perfect in this. So if you really like to hear crystal clear audio, maybe skip this one. But if you want to take a chance and go down through the path of the unknown with community members from the TV show with a crackly voice, then join us for this new beautiful episode with CJ.
Okay, so we are here with CJ, one of our cast members from the Garden Commune Cult and a friend that we knew since I think we were just talking about it. It was right after the Vice or during the Vice documentary. You came to the Garden.
Yeah, that was my first time meeting you guys. Yeah,
and it was all through TikTok. You're one of the many amazing TikTokers that came to the Garden, but you were already had.
It wasn't through TikTok.
No, I was doing a road trip at the time. I was in undergrad doing urban planning with the focus on the sustainable infrastructure and off-grid communities. And I was on a road trip to all the national parks in an RV that I built, which you guys, I think, saw. And the place where I had just previously stopped, someone suggested I should go there and check it out because I was also stopping at intentional communities. So I don't know if they heard about it through TikTok, but I didn't hear about it through TikTok.
That's kind of cool. It's kind of the exact same way that we came to the Garden. We were like on our little intentional community.
Right.
That's cool.
Wait, so it was a different community that told you about the Garden?
It was a friend who's a civil rights activist in Mississippi.
Wow. See me, I just always want to believe that everyone came through TikTok and it was a good thing, you know what I mean? But what?
They're like trophies for Tree.
Sorry. But so your trip during that time, you were going to a bunch of communities. You went to one that were making like bells or something. What's that all about?
Yeah, Arcosanti in Arizona, they make bells out of bronze. They have like relationships with mines, and so they're importing like copper and tin that's being mined like directly from mines, and then they're smelting it and forging bronze wind bells that are like different animals, and each one supports some endangered species or some threatened species. And so you can get one of like a wolf, which is what I got, and then it goes to funding wolf sanctuaries, and then you have this nice bronze wind chime that's really cool because it like ages in an interesting way. They give it an acid bath to make it like look weathered, and they like develop their own character, and it's a really cool thing for a community to make, and kind of like a low lift. A lot of communities doing similar stuff with like melting aluminum and making stuff, or stuff like that.
Wow.
It sounds so advanced compared to where like anything I've been a part of. It's like, that's awesome.
Like actually being able to make a product. Like,
yeah.
It's actually not that hard. I've been to intentional communities that are like there's one in San Francisco where they do that in the apartment, and I'm like, that's really not safe. Like, I hope everyone's wearing respirators, but like they're like smelting aluminum cans to build various sort of like 3D molded objects.
Wow, I really want to take an acid bath. How do I do that? I guess it's not safe for a human, but But in the place where they're making bells and stuff like this, how many people are there? Like most, is there like people living there?
I think it's 87. Last time I was there, it's kind of split into 3 groups. So the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture is there, and that's like 30 people, all the graduate students of architecture. And then they've got the people working on bronze. And then there's a whole separate group working on like pottery. They're also making bells and dishes and stuff out of clay that they actually also procure themselves from the river that goes through the land. And then they use these silt molds. They'll take a river sand and create the shape, the negative form in a hole in the ground, and then fill the void with clay. And then they let it sit for a couple of days and suck all the wet clay out, and you've got like a pot, right? So it's all just stuff that they're using from the land that they're on sustainably. Super cool.
Wow.
But those
that's
3
amazing.
groups, it sort of makes like a tribe together there, in the cultural anthropology sense. So they're staying under the Dunbar number of 150, and it's split into these 3 groups of 30 to 50, which is like right in line with how anthropology tells us that humans evolved to live in these small group communities together.
Like 30 to 50, is that like the magic number?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about that a lot at the garden. It seems like it's like minimum of like 25 is when things start to really like flow really well. It's like, okay, there's enough that nobody is feeling too stressed out by taking on any one role or whatever.
Yeah.
Trying to get to that number though is so difficult. Like just trying to get to
Yeah.
25 people. Like we were just today checking out a old community spot that has been there since the 80s, and now it's just kind of like a rundown, metal scrap yard with buildings that are decaying, which it's still like, it's beautiful. I love it. I felt very at home there, but it's just like, it's sad to see these attempts of trying to get to this 25 people, these 50 people.
Sure.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, and I think also for institutions, you see this sort of arc, right? You have in the early stages, you have activists who are really engaged, who have a vision, and that's what attracts people. And then it kind of starts to plateau, right? Into this like, we're not growing anymore. The ratio of impact to number of people goes down. And then you typically see either a plateau for a while or a decline, and then you have more of this like bureaucracy, arguing about arguing, not so much getting stuff done kind of vibe, and then it's time to start something new. Activists move on and do that. This is always how activist organizations tend to work throughout history, especially with like defining a whole different reality that we can all live under.
Yeah. Yeah, it really made me think about like how, like, what is the best like strategy for like, using kind of this permaculture mutual aid network like idea that we've talked about so much, where we have like these traveling working groups that can visit these different places, because so many people, it's like the 2 most common comments is like, people either being like, I have land, come visit me, or people being like, I can't afford this, how could I ever move off grid? And it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's like 2 sides of this. That's one half and the other half. That's how do we put them
Yeah,
together?
absolutely.
But figuring out who actually works well together. And then also like, I mean, yeah, there's like, I think there's like a catalyst point that you need to hit, because like a couple people living on land, if one person joins them, it for those 4 people to get along well enough to entertain each other for a long period of time, it's like that's a really strained relationship. But it's like once you hit like 15, it's like, okay, it's a little like, there's sometimes you need more to kind of like ease the tension between everybody.
Right.
And it's like everybody wants to come to the garden because it looks so fun, look at all these people, but then there's so many other projects, and it's like, how do we get them to that spot that's like regenerative?
Yeah, I think that's also like, people always say, for example, I want to go to Burning Man, it looks like so much fun, and I say that's not what it is. It's not. It's like Jumanji, right? It's like, if you survive this adventure, then like you're going to have personal growth and become a better person. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be hard. And I think like I take that same approach to encouraging people to check out sites like IC.org, the Foundation for Intentional Communities. Whenever they're like, can I come live with you? It's like, no, like, why don't you find a community near where you are or near where you want to be, right? Like, one of the big lessons that has always stood out to me from one of the people who was there at the first meeting when we decided to create the permaculture mutual aid network and do all of these land projects, was someone who had participated in building an intentional community that was urban, which is a really cool example, and it's like an amazing piece of history. But he's like, if you make people feel like there's an open invite and you build a community that can survive forever with like 30, 50, maybe 100 people, but then 10,000 people show up, community over. You know, you just can't survive that. It's the hug of death. And so I always try to direct people to like, find one near you or near where you want to live. Like find one in Costa Rica, right? Like, why do you want to come to this specific one? Right. Like,
Also,
there are 10,000.
right. But also, like, for me, I realized that there's so many people who want this. They say they're going to come. And just through, like, my experience of, like, making the TikTok videos, we put our address out online. And the thousands of people who said, I want to do this. I want to come. But in reality, it was hundreds that came. And it was still amazing. I had a lot of, a really cool time. But, like... I don't think 10,000 people are really going to come unless it's that cool. I mean, the first ever rainbow gathering. True.
An eco village in Detroit is going to be really easy for 10,000 people to show up.
Wow, we should get land in Detroit.
By the city center.
They're actually doing that. They're doing like whole areas of the city are just being like leveled and turned into parks to try to raise the value of the rest of it because so many people are leaving. It's a super common sort of like rejuvenation process now for cities that are on decline, where a lot of people are leaving, to just change a lot of it into wilderness again and sort of recreate that value in what's left.
That sounds cool.
Let the trees grow. Let the weeds get wild. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were just touching on Burning Man. It's beautiful because that's where we get to spend a lot of time with each other. Like, of course, we've been to the garden together, but we also go to Burning Man together. Or not together, but we meet there, we hang out, we party, and it's super cool to see all these different types of how like random community could be and look like. It can look like any other way. The garden's this open door where anyone can show up to, but the Burning Man is this. You can buy this ticket, you can come, and you can find community too. And it's super beautiful that you've been traveling all around and checking out all these cool spots and seeing community everywhere. And now we just filmed a TV show about friggin' community. Did you see your scene? You got your scene there in the teepee. Saying, oh, we got to get the shelter. We got to get the tornadoes are coming. Will they come? Who knows?
Vetoed 3 times.
Hey,
Spoiler.
In the episode description.
Okay, sorry. But it's cool. We don't know what's going to come yet. We're going to see. It's going to get wild.
Will we all die in a tornado?
Is this just a hologram of ourselves?
Yeah.
So another topic that I wanted to bring up while we have you here. So last week in our podcast, we talked a little bit about the idea. So like you've been visiting a lot of different communities. We talk a lot at the garden and with the People's Project about, how to create networks of communities, like, building upon, like imagining there's 5 lands all around us in Tennessee at the garden, and we could have, different communities focusing on different things. And then I always imagine like, okay, if this one was focusing on making flour, and then because that's something that we usually have to buy at the garden because we don't produce flour. We don't have that kind of infrastructure. So imagining that there's a community nearby we could get flour from, or communities that we can get milk from or meat from and things like that. And kind of like closing the loop of needing to buy anything. And then imagining that happening in other states and local networks. And then, but kind of always basing off this, like you were saying, like the Dunbar number, like groups of 30 to 50. So it's kind of like creates like this localized economy of small groups.
And you avoid social problems that you get in larger groups.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like, because, I remember reading in this one book that, like beyond 100 people, it's like almost impossible to operate without hierarchy because there's just not enough levels of communication to function at all,
And it's not possible to have consensus. Like if you have a group of 10,000 people, you can't even get them to agree that we should all continue to be alive. Like someone's gonna be like, no, right? It's just not possible to do consensus
Yeah.
on big groups.
1 in 10,000 people wants everyone to die. That's the stat. Is that a real stat?
I mean,
Hey, you're the
You're the stats guy.
You're
Yeah.
the stats guy. So yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so we talked about that in the last podcast, and I got an interesting comment on the video. Kind of someone doubting whether or not, like, is that actually a sustainable, or like, could that actually make any kind of significant impact on like the way that we, have already contributed to climate change? Like, to like, could we ever be localized enough that we were actually, making any kind of impact to, stopping, like, radically changing the climate? Or is it a solution that kind of just maybe is like a way to prepare for what might happen based on the like change that we've already done? And I honestly was like, I don't even know how to answer this question, but I know somebody who does, and so we should talk to CJ.
Yeah. Well, so like when I first started with urban planning, one of the things that got me really interested in exploring intentional communities that are off grid is this report I read from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that forecast, like, there's 22 known future events that are all going to happen. Whichever one happens first is going to cause an 18 to 36 month nationwide power grid blackout, and they're forecasting 90% population decline in the US in the first 12 months. And I read that and I was like, what is different about the other 10% that they're just fine? And like, what can I do to make it 11% or 12%? And it's people who aren't relying on a 1,000-mile supply chain for their next Caesar salad, right? It's people who aren't relying on distribution infrastructure and refrigeration in grocery stores and fast food restaurants for every meal. It's people who are able to produce those things for themselves. If you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You've got all these different needs. The source of fulfillment of those needs for most people is McDonald's and Walmart. And these things are very fragile and they're going to break. That's just a fact, right? The question is not if, but when, right? According to like the US Army Corps of Engineers and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And it's been 10 years since that report came out, and things are much worse now, right? And if you look at communities that are more resilient, that are better able to survive and thrive through unexpected stressors, which is a measurable thing, what you see is these strong solidarity networks of mutual aid and potentially permaculture. But the first example that came to mind to me is I've done a lot of work with Chinese enclaves in the US, managing large affordable housing projects and so on. And one of the things that's really interesting for Chinatowns across the country is they have like their own transit systems. They have their own bus networks. Like they have their own food distribution infrastructure. They're able to build this whole other society inside of society that is totally separate, that allows them to do all the stuff that they're doing in a totally different way. And I'm not saying one of those two is more sustainable, but I'm saying it's obviously possible to build alternative systems that are totally separate from what's the mainstream system, right? So if we look at examples in the intentional community world, there are networks of intentional communities that already have like international trade, right? And have like their own ships that move goods around. Like this is a thing. And there are lots of these sort of hub communities that you see, like, I probably shouldn't give specific examples, but there are lots of these hub communities where lots of new communities spring up around them. Arco is a good example. Arcosanti is this like legendary argument about how civilization should be different. And like I said, they have relationships with mines, so they're like literally like mining raw ore and turning it into finished goods that they sell to benefit like endangered species. So like that's totally radical. Like there's absolutely no part of that process that's relying on anything except what they're doing. And like from taking the tin out of the ground to getting it into people's homes. And so what you see is when there are these like hub communities making these really like aggressive radical arguments about like things can be different. Like that's a radical claim, right? You see that they sort of spawn all of these groups that orbit them, right? So physically like orbit them. If you look at like the garden, for example, there are all these other communities that are very similar that have spawned off of that are nearby. And it's obviously the same for Arco. Arco's been there for almost 60 years, so there's a lot of them. And it's true for many of these communities where people are making these kinds of claims about a different world being possible. You see lots of spin-offs nearby that form these natural networks. And I think when we talk about like the permaculture mutual aid network, we're not inventing that, right? Like this is something we observe, and we want to try to reinforce it in the same way as these I don't know if I should, it might be a spoiler actually. I'm not trying to define how people should walk around the land. I'm trying to support what they're already doing instead of telling you what to do with this art project that like highlights that in a way that it's like, this is what you're already doing. Let's make it easier. Instead of like, this is what you should do. Right. And that's what I see as accomplishing. And that's where I see like what we're doing has the least amount of like stress points when we're reinforcing and supporting these things that we observe, like natural networks forming between communities, versus like, here's the world we want to be in, so do it, right? That's kind of the mainstream argument. It's like, this is how the world is supposed to be and should be, or else. Where we're saying like, this is what actually is. How do we make it easier for people? And it's like this totally different perspective on like how to organize.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think about like just kind of the whole concept of how we, bought new land in Missouri, put it into a trust and said like, this is now a place where like through a process that people could potentially live. And sometimes I've questioned like that strategy because I've been like, are we just like building communities and leaving and then being like, someone move in, and then it's like, is it kind of like, hey, do this, and so it's interesting to like look at the same thing that we're doing with the mindset of like how to make it easier for what people are already wanting to do.
Yeah. There's this really good talk by Zizek. I don't know if you guys like Zizek. He's this Slovenian philosopher.
Yeah, I know him.
He talks about he hates movies about political revolution. Like V for Vendetta is the worst movie ever. Because he says, I would love to see V for Vendetta Part 2. Like, what do they do next? Right? Yes, everyone's in the streets. Okay, now what? And the real answer, he calls himself morning after revolutionary. That it's like, okay, that's over now. How do things materially change for people the next day?
Yeah.
When do people actually start to feel the difference? And if you look at these projects that we've done, like look at the Pirates Cove project, where we raised money with an average donation of like less than $10 from thousands of people to buy dozens of acres on a lake and build a free community. And you look at people who are living there today, like they're building all this amazing stuff. And it's like they're doing great, right? And that's the measure of if it works. And if you look at like the videos that they're posting from Emberfield now that it's been 6 months since we filmed the TV show, they're building cabins.
Yeah.
Like they're still having these like gatherings by the fire. They're coming on the live stream, after the episodes, and everybody's around the fire playing guitars and they're growing food and they're building houses. And it's like, that's the measure of success. And like these other things around like, okay, how do we take it to the next level? How do we like engage them in a network together to help like amplify the process of doing the next one? Like, that's great. But the real success is the fact that like this is changing lots of people's lives every day.
Dude, you gave me a great idea. We're gonna make V for Vendetta Part 2, and we're all wearing masks, growing food, shitting in composters, building fucking infrastructure. Like, let's go. Let's piggyback on the big media that are making these cool movies, and then make the
That
Part
is
2.
legitimately a great idea.
And then that guy, I forget it, Schleswig or whatever. He's gonna love us then. Then we'll get him on board.
He can star in the movie.
Yeah.
He can come grow food with us in the forest.
Share it. Wow.
But that's cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, I like the the realizations of like stuff that might or like you said will happen is yeah, I like to present the vision as like, yay, this is what we're all gonna do, and it's gonna be so much fun. And so the
Right.
reality of that is but it yeah, I trust you. It's probably gonna happen.
I think it's very tempting to try to look for a way to fix the world, and I don't think that's the right way to be using our energy. And I reached this conclusion talking with like I have a close friend who's like a really big like transgender Black activist who's like, this approach is wrong. You need to be focusing on helping people be okay. That is what matters. Is the like material suffering of people, not solving climate change. You're not going to solve climate change. It's wasted effort.
It's kind of
Right.
it feels almost ridiculous to talk about it now. It's just like, all right, you know, like
Especially for people that study ecology, because it's like, oh, 90% of all birds and insects have died since 1970. And it's like, how do we fix that? You're not going to fix that. Like, focused on like, how do we survive what's coming? Right?
yeah.
That's a much better use of energy.
Well, one cool thing is that like the way that we're trying to live is better for the environment, but
Sure.
on a more than that though, it's actually a solution for climate migration. There's going to be so many people coming to pieces of land where they don't have resources, and what they do have is nature. They have firewood, they have hopefully rain that they can catch water from. You know, the structures that we're building right now are examples for the people who are migrating without much resources in the future.
Yeah. The World Bank, or rather the International Monetary Fund, forecasts that we can expect 143 million climate refugees in the next 20 years, which is half our current population.
I think
So, like, how do we get ready for that? Right? Because that's coming.
in my opinion, I think the best thing anybody could do is go to a rainbow gathering, because it sounds crazy, but like that was because like especially the ones in the US, like, you know, there's tons of wild people and there's but like seeing how thousands of people within the course of a month are able to make some kind of system that they are processing their waste in a safe way, they are tapping the water, you know, and they're functioning, and it's not scary, it's like happy. That was one of my first things that I was like, how could I make refugee camps more like rainbow gatherings? Because it's like, it's just people in a spot, and they would be able to function with a lot less money even needed. But yeah, that was.
Yeah, I've never been. I should probably go.
Yeah, I just like whatever you want to say about it, but like at the baseline, it's like it's a very functional community of people that are figuring out how to live in a safe way in a small space.
And not everyone's the same as well. It's important, you know, like, we come with a value of wanting to like connect with nature, but we're also very different people, but we all seem to get along and to allow each other to be themselves without much judgment, which is definitely going to be needed because there's going to be so many different cultures having to coexist with love, you know, hopefully.
Hurricane Katrina happened during Burning Man, and people heard about it, right? And a lot of people went straight from Burning Man to New Orleans and brought tools, because it's like, okay, we know how to set up water infrastructure for 80,000 people without everyone getting sick. Most people don't know how to do that. Like, we have all the tools we need to like do demos and like fix people's houses and stuff. And they showed up and just volunteered and did it. Just complete solidarity. Like, there's no organization at all. And out of that effort was born Burners Without Borders, which I'm one of the regional chairs for the San Francisco Bay Area for this organization. It does disaster response, and a lot of like most of what we've been doing recently is trying to help with unhoused populations around the Bay Area, and it's very similar, right? Like, these skills are not normal, and they're so important, and they're going to be so much more important in the coming decades. Absolutely.
Also, just like I think the dynamics and the energy of mutual aid that happens in gatherings like Rainbow Gatherings and Burning Man, where you have a gift economy, is a complete mindset shift. It's something we were really working on this year when there was the flooding that happened. And immediately I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, so we are now in a situation where resources are maybe going to be limited. Maybe we're going to be stuck here for a week extra at Burning Man. And
at Burning Man.
Yeah. So I saw you look confused. Yeah. So it was interesting in that moment because I was just talking to people at the porta potties, and we're all kind of talking about what we have and what's about to happen, and people were like, things are going to get ugly real quick. Like as soon, people are going to start. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, this is my chance. I'm in a disaster situation. So me and Tree put like a sign in front of our camp that was like, because we did have a ridiculous amount of extra water and propane and food. And we didn't really need anything, but I wanted to make a sign that said like, we have and we need. So I said like, we have extra propane, food, water. We need baby wipes and blankets, because that was something we were kind of low on. And yeah, some of my friends were even kind of uncomfortable with it because they're like, well, what if things, do get bad and people think that we have all the resources? I'm like, we're not going to let people starve on our doorsteps, and we're not going to, if it gets to that point, like where it's like an actual physical battle, like the hunks next door definitely have us beat anyways. So we might as well try to like create a culture of mutual aid. I think that's our
people too.
Exactly. Yeah. Make friends is our best chance right now. If this actually gets ugly, is like our block's the one where everyone's got each other's backs, and like when people see that, it also makes everybody calm down because they're like, oh, the camp next door to me is actually sharing resources. I can relax. I don't have to hoard my peanut butter. We can, Yeah.
Also, it's like a week, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, it was fine. We left like the next day,
It was that moment.
A lot of times in those situations, like, it can go south. Like, if people don't have a story that they share about, like, not going south, it goes south, right? Like, there's a whole new industry now for, this is kind of dark, but, like, when they have the safety drills for elementary schools now about, like, things that might happen to them in the school, there's a whole new industry of, like, counselors to provide PTSD services after those drills, because it becomes like the Stanford prison experiment in these elementary schools, because there's this like story of be afraid and it's going to be scary and like there's danger, and then it like really gets to people and they turn into this other mode that's like deeply traumatic, and like that can happen. But the way to avoid that, like the guy who did the Stanford prison experiment spent the rest of his career talking about how to avoid that. And like he wrote The Lucifer Effect, which is this really good book. And he talks about like, you need to stop like not other people. Don't use like terms of othering, right? Like use terms of community. And that like focusing on community rather than like they're outsiders. The difference between these two vibes is what determines if a group is going to be heroic under pressure or like chaotic and evil under pressure. And like I keep thinking of Zimbardo and his work, and like his books when I think about the byline of the show, like Commune or Cult. The difference is, how do things go when things are not going well? Like, how do you react to that? Do you come together and solve the problem, or does it become Stanford prison experiment? Like, that's the difference. And the fact is, society is the Stanford prison experiment. Like, that's real life, right? And so like offering an alternative in the form of community is the solution. So it's not just about infrastructure. I think like a lot of people keep posting online like, why aren't you guys doing any gardening? Like, we are, they're just not showing it, but like the gardening,
what do you think we're digging?
Oh, we're just digging graveyards here.
But the gardening and the infrastructure is actually not the hard part.
Right.
The other people are the hard part.
Yeah.
Right, figuring out how to live together.
Yeah. It's something I also add sometimes, like being like, the garden is like seen, sometimes it attracts people from like kind of this fringe mindset where they have like a lot of frustration towards the rest of society, which is understandable. But it's something that I've always tried to like, like not too much othering, like people be like, yeah, cool, you guys are awesome, and screw all those sheep out there. We're the only ones that get it, and that's also something that, I don't like.
Still doing it.
Yeah. Like, wait a minute. Exactly.
I think there's definitely like a pipeline there. There's definitely like a frustration with society to like misanthropy pipeline, right? Like it's easy to say like this culture that we have is not working for people. Like 80% of people can't afford housing, right? People are like bunking up with strangers because they can't afford an apartment. Like the if you live in San Francisco, to afford an average 1 bedroom, you have to be making over 180,000 a year. Like that's insane. That's double the median. You know, it's like it's literally 80% of people can't afford any housing. 80% of people. So like it's really easy to take that fact and the experience of that fact and turn it into like hating humanity and like wanting the world to end, right?
Right,
And it's like
right.
no. Let's focus that energy on like there's an alternative that works and it's like actually not that hard and like it's already there waiting for you and you can do it.
And I think the mindset of it is not something that's easy to convey, you know. It's not something that's very easy to convey in a reality television of, yeah, like what you're just saying, like it's more than just the how do we do it? Oh, all you do is dig a trench in the ground, and you know, it's like it's a very, you know, and it takes trial and error and all these things. But
in a sense that is how you do it. It's getting to the point of being able to dig the trench to shit in that's hard.
getting to the social cohesion to even have
Yeah.
the energy to do that.
And then like learning how to deal with people so you can all share the trench to shit in.
Yeah.
Like that's the hard part. It's not the trench. The trench is the easy part.
All right.
Aho.
Seems like we're circling around the TV show. We could start talking about it.
Still need to talk about the biggest orgy in the world, though.
Oh yeah, Tree wanted to ask you about comfort and joy.
I think they're going to make that I think that's the ending of the show. My theory is they're going to create a story around that.
I hope they do. I feel like it gives you a good vibe, you know?
They're
Like,
going to show you at the sexy party, like saying that as if like that's what the sex
there.
is. I know, but I'm just saying they don't care. They show you.
They'll Photoshop me in.
Yeah. Or just like cut away scene and it's you being like, I helped organize the biggest orgy in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so like what happened was we were there for like 2 months filming. I left right before the gathering started to go to the gathering at the garden. And there was a big party, which is what we do at the end of every one of these land projects. We build a community together and then we throw a big party and invite hundreds of people. And then it's like, who wants to live here? Kind of
is
thing.
this a spoiler?
No, we already
No.
said that. And this is for every project we do.
Yeah, okay. Good.
So
Sorry,
that's not what's being depicted in the show. The show is showing something very different.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we have no idea what they're going to show.
Based on the trailers.
But I think Tree wanted...
they interviewed me about something totally not related to the show at all, which is like, for 5 years, I've volunteered with various nonprofits throwing like the world's largest orgies. And in various capacities, doing promotion, doing communication, being a dungeon monitor, a lot of dungeon monitoring. And so somehow they found out about that. I don't know how they found out about that. And then they started asking me all these questions about that. And you told them?
Tree definitely told them.
I don't know if I told him.
He's so proud of you for that.
It's like it's an amazing thing, and I think everyone needs to know that if anyone needs to have a good time, you can help them out. Like people need these kind of experiences, and it's amazing that you're helping facilitate them, because like what's more beautiful than love and people just breaking down these barriers of like what's actually possible, you know, like maybe TV is actually not the most entertaining thing that you can do whenever you come home from work. Maybe it's enjoying people, physical sensation. It's because that's the most sustainable thing, probably. I mean, you know.
And I mean, like even Karl Marx wrote about that, right? Yeah. But they were asking. So I sat down for like over an hour, and it's like 10 million questions, and then suddenly they're like, so next question, like, what are some similarities and differences between building intentional communities in the forest and throwing multi-thousand person orgies? And I'm like, what?
They save the questions they actually care about for the last one, so that you're just like, you feel like it's the end. You're like, you know, they sit me down for like 3 hours. Yeah. And then they're like, what's a cult? And like, that's the only thing that's like, everything else they ask me that in.
But I was like, actually, there are some interesting similarities. It's the Dunbar number. Like, it really shouldn't be more than 150 people. You get all kinds of problems if it's like not possible to make sure everyone's okay if it's too many people. And I think it should stay small, like 50 to 150. And you need to have like a huge focus on consent and consensus and like setting community agreements together. And like, actually, it's like really similar. There's like a lot of similarities.
So funny.
So I'm sure that clip of me saying that is going to be worked into some completely different story.
For sure. Because so many moments that one of the producers would be like, I'd be like, how's your day going? And she'd be like, great. Like, you know, Tree just said this and it was so hilarious. Or she told me about that specific moment. She was like, CJ just compared oranges. And so I was like, okay. And so far, everything that she's told me she enjoyed has actually been in it. So I'm like, it's definitely.
I've always like worked really hard to keep these two parts of myself totally separate. Like, and there's nothing online to connect any of that to me in any way. And I've always kind of asked myself, like, why? What am I like really scared of? Like, would an employer really care? Like, tech companies are doing that, right?
Right.
It's all
They're
out
going
in the
on
open.
business trips with that in mind. Like, dude, I think this is your Goldilocks. You know what I mean? Like, you are a smart pancake.
Together.
But like, yeah, I think it only helps you as a guy, you know. But maybe I'm weird, you know. Like, I think that trying to piss on camera to educate, you know, like maybe I'm on a weird side, but I think that helps your everything else that you do in life. But whatever.
Did you guys? I don't think I've ever asked you when the first time you came to see me at Burning Man, we like got food, and I was like, let's go eat lunch in the middle of the orgy, and we like go into the orgy and sit there and eat lunch while we're completely surrounded by like orgy.
That was like my main. It was so cool. That was one of the main things. Like, people would be like, how was Burning Man? I'd be like, it was so funny. I ate falafel with my friend CJ, like in the middle of this orgy and I just like sat and like, we just like talked and ate lunch.
It was the only place with AC.
It was like the main takeaway. I don't know. I don't know what to say other than it was a story and it was like, like, it's just one of those moments where you're like, this is really funny that I'm doing this right now.
Yeah,
that's why I love like trying to figure out like new ways, like trying to decide like for ourselves, like how do we want to live. I think like religion and different sorts of influences have affected our culture in certain ways that were good and bad. And I think places like Burning Man allow you just to kind of like dissolve all them preconceptions on how you should live and figure out like, how do I want to live? And things like that come up, which are now that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, you know, and affect me in a beautiful way, just to see what's possible. Like, yeah, we can do this. I can see you tied up on I don't even know what it's called, and still enjoy my falafel. You know what I mean? Like,
I personally am not into that. Though. I don't like being
not yet. He was busy eating falafel with us. It was...
yeah, but what were we talking about? TV, right?
Not to dwell on Zizek, but he has this other thing that he says is really good. He has t-shirts that say, I would prefer not to. And it doesn't say, I would prefer this or I would prefer that. It says, I would prefer not to. And he has this really good talk where he's like, if you're in this, like the system of culture and society gives you like this false dichotomy of choices between the options that are available to you, as though that's the limit of your potential experiences. And you can learn more about yourself and reality by choosing neither option than by picking one of the boxes that society wants you to fit in. And like, this is a huge topic in queer theory. So like Judith Butler calls it subversive acts. Like if you're there's one thing to try to tug the Overton window around, right? Of like what is socially acceptable in the spectrum of possibilities. But it's another thing to just be like, no, to all of that, I'm going to do something totally different. And I'm going to show people that that's possible. And that this is the definition of what queering is as a verb. Is like, I would prefer not to. Like, oh, I have these two. I'm going to vote between like Biden and Trump again. Like, I would prefer not to. Right. Like, those both are awful. And so it's like, kind of also gets at the core of like what we're doing, that like we're telling people you don't have to do that. You can do something totally different and it's fine and it's actually better and you'll be less stressed out and you'll eat better food and you'll be around people who care about you all the time. And like a lot of people are really, really invested and bought into this false reality of like, I think people who don't understand history feel like this society today is normal because it's normal to them. But the reality is like almost every aspect of our daily lives today is so completely beyond the pale of insanity on any historical perspective. The idea of 80% of people not having access to affordable housing, like that's insane. It's untenable. And it's the same with food, and it's the same with jobs. It's the same with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're doing is saying like, there's actually a totally different option. And like, I think people are rightly afraid and like scared of the idea of like there's this philosopher Daniel Dennett who said like, there's no polite way to invite people to consider that they've wasted their lives on a lie. And people get mad if you invite them to question assumptions that are harmful to them, that they've just always assumed are true. And we should expect people to get mad. But it's good for them, right? To ask the question.
Yeah, it makes sense why. Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like people are so invested that they tell us it's not possible. They get angry, like they try to make us wrong in every way that they possibly can because it's
It just has to be a cult.
Yeah. There's no way.
Yeah.
Oh, it's sad.
I couldn't possibly be wrong in my assumptions. You're a cult.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The only way that people can come together on a piece of land and want to share and grow food means that there's a evil hierarchy with a person on top who's telling you how to live and what to do. You know, like it's weird. Like we've been living in compound structures of family and villages like since the dawn of time. You know, this is what we've been doing. The nuclear family, the idea of having a mom and a dad and going to school, that is a new invention from the Industrial Revolution. Like this is completely new. We've been living a different way for so long, and we're just going back to that kind of model with more of this liberal ideas on how we can live and exist, and without religion, which I think is one of the most profound things that we're doing. You know, a lot of communities out there, when they want to come together in ways like this, they have religion to bring them together, but we don't. That's what separates us so much from the possibility of being a cult. But of course, not to say that religious groups coming together are cults either, but we're so far from it. But
it also is what makes it hard for us to organize it all. Like it's like there's a certain doctrine that I feel like these other religious groups are like so functional, and we're just like constantly battling because it's like no one's in charge. We all believe different things, but it's like also beautiful for that reason too.
You know, before World War II, it's like 86% of Americans lived on farms.
Sounds
it's
nice.
That new.
Yeah.
The federal government gave trillions, it's like over $100 trillion in handouts to boomers and their parents to build the suburbs and move everyone into these urban environments. That's not normal historically. That's very new. And it happened through enormous, wasteful federal subsidy programs that created this world we live in now. And it's a world that sucks and doesn't work.
Boring.
People were better off before. And we can still go back to that. It's easy.
And don't worry, guys.
What's normal.
You can still have a white picket fence, but, you know, I might still cross it. Whatever.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need to just offer people the option to still have white picket fences. Then they'll finally come around.
That would be cute. Put them around like the bus.
Picket fence initiative. Like, that's why people don't want to come.
They still have this dream.
There's a Burning Man camp that does that. It's called
Suburbia.
They're assholes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they
put
were
little white
mean.
picket fences around their tents.
Yeah. Our friend, who it was her first burn, and she made the big mistake of asking for the Wi-Fi password. Oh, and they ripped her a new hole. I tell you that. Oh.
There's a camp called I don't remember what it's called, but they set up fake Wi-Fi hotspots with your camp name on it, and it'll say like your camp name, ask for password, and then people will show up and like, hey, I just really need to send this email for work. Can I use the Wi-Fi for just a second? And it's like, we don't have Wi-Fi. They're like, no, it says. I'm like, yeah, someone put that. It's like they're making fun of you. And they do it all over. Like they put them
it
everywhere.
works. It works.
And water hoses and everything. The whole thing, yeah, it's just a troll
Yeah.
city. All the
It's
trolls
great.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very subversive. to
I'm
those
just so
kinds of-
sensitive though, you know what I mean? I get like sometimes a little hurt. I just want us to hold hands and love each other.
Yeah.
Man's all about
Well,
that sass.
Yeah, it's all about being salsa.
Yeah. I think the word they like is to snark.
Snark.
They like
Yeah,
to
that's
be
what
snarky.
Uh-huh.
It's like, I don't know. Because you have these twin principles of like radical independence, but also communal effort. So it's like, okay, those are opposites. How do you balance that, right? How do you be the person in between that's like together with people, but also taking care of your shit and like not kind of like asking for everything from everyone?
Something that I like about the snark culture of like at Burning Man, people just being a little more upfront. Like I remember I saw this one, it was at Lamplighters. There was like somebody who stood up and she was like, I'm gonna have a meeting tomorrow, or she was like beating around the bush, and then some old man on the other side was just like, get to the point already, and everybody was like laughing. But I was like, it's like this like really rude kind of way, but it's almost like, there's like this hippie culture of like being so polite, but then it can be kind of like passive aggressive. Like we didn't like like in Rainbow, it's like people are always like of course I didn't mean to offend you, brother, like blah blah blah, but it's like there's other feelings behind that sometimes, and it's like it's interesting how the snark sometimes, I think it's like through humor, it's like I'm just going to say whatever I think to you, but that's what we all do, and then we just get it out and we move through it.
And
I
that's
see
good.
it's like a different form of communication of how to sustainably live together.
Just saying, there's an emitting sound. I don't know if all your phones are off.
Beep, beep.
I can hear like a boom, 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 boom,
I think
boom.
someone's down the
Oh,
street.
that's what it is. Okay. It's a cool beat.
So what did you think of this week's episode?
We're losing light here.
It was good. I thought it was interesting that I think the thing most people are talking about is other than the scene with me, is the scene with the hunting thing.
Yeah, a lot of people
They left most of it out. Like, first of all, it wasn't only Bodhi that said that. And like I agree with Bodhi. Like, not just that we shouldn't potentially be accidentally killing our neighbors' pets in these traps that Tyler wanted to build, but also like there was a whole conversation, for example, around the sustainability of hunting if we're also taking away habitat for the animals that live there to plant food. And like we should be, if we want to have sustainable hunting, then we should be first contributing to the food supply that we're taking away from the native animals. And then, in a couple of years, maybe that would make sense. But like right now, we're already having a negative impact on the population by converting prairie to farmland. So like we need to first focus on like giving back something to them, right? Like planting stuff that they can eat. Because we're also putting like fences around all of these trees that we're planting. Like we're taking a lot of habitat away from them. So hunting is, and so it's not sustainable if we're taking away their habitat and then we're also hunting them, and we don't need to. Like we have plenty of food. There's no reason to be hunting. And like that would have been an interesting thing to leave in, right?
I thought so.
It seemed like they just wanted to be two people fighting. It was really an interesting conversation.
But more than that, like as a paranoid person, I feel like they're almost trying to show the downside to consensus decision making is that like there's only one person. That was their main goal, was that to show that there only needs to be one person to say no to doing a project. And I mean, yes, that did need to be shown. That is.
They already showed that with Vibe, though, right?
Wait, with which one?
I felt like they already showed that with Vibe. Maybe you're right. They were trying to highlight it with multiple examples.
Wait, it was the name of the episode with the tornado shelter.
Oh yes, they already did. So yeah, So they didn't even.
Well, the name of the episode was Group Consensus, and it was, I think they wanted to show like, oh, look, Tyler is a little frustrated with that. And it is frustrating. I remember a lot of people who come to the garden for the first time, that is one of the most frustrating things to them, is they're like, wait, are you kidding me? One person doesn't like my project and it can't happen. And we're like, I mean, stay for a couple months and keep proposing it. I don't know. You got to just like, so I was really happy that Bodhi demonstrated that by blocking it. I think another point is like it kind of makes us look like we are like, yeah, we don't need to hunt. We'll just, we have the dumpster, but people are like, but what if society collapses and you don't have the dumpster anymore? Which I think is another point of like understanding like, at the garden, one of the points in the mission statement is like, be as sustainable as possible while keeping a productive pace. And it's like, if we were approaching sustainability being like, we need to make our own nails and make our own, then we would not be. So it's more like, let's use the resources that are available to us at this moment to prepare ourselves for not needing anything at all. So if we had said, let's just grow all our own food, we would put so much energy into that maybe we wouldn't be able to put as much energy into building up systems so that we could make our own nails or whatever. It's like using what we have now to get to where we want to be, and eventually hopefully not needing the outside world at all. And so that's why I think people should understand that dumpster diving for us is like a transition to being able to focus our energy on that.
One of the things I hope they leave in from my really long interview with them is I talked about like, they asked me like, what is sustainability? And I was like, well, the Brundtland Commission worked with 190 countries around the world to decide the answer to that question for 40 years. And the answer they came up with was sustainability is being able to meet your short-term needs in a way that doesn't sacrifice your long-term needs. So in this example, we're on new land planting food, right? So a year from now, we're going to have food. But like right now, we're bringing stuff there to get us to that 1 year that it takes for seeds to turn into food, right? So that is a different problem from established communities like the garden, where like they've been there for 10 years. There's lots of food, right, that they're able to grow, and they have been for a long time. And there's we had this whole conversation at this land about the difference between the skills of living at a community versus the skills of building a community. Is totally separate, and it's a totally different project.
Yeah, it's kind of, like right now, this was like a group organized by the People's Project to come build this new community. And then after that, people who wanted to stay were able to stay and figure out, okay, where do we go from here? But we also, I think that they wanted to make the show seem like, I think they had the script of the show when they thought they were going to be able to film it at the garden in Tennessee. So it was about these new people going through these challenges and And so that, ideally they could have shown us all harvesting together and shown us doing these things. And because they didn't really like transition the plot line enough to explain like the whole we're starting over, it looks like a little bit like we're just like this really weird commune that has absolutely nothing, and we're just like this group of friends living on land digging holes all day long, and and you have to get into our cool group of people, and can you get in? It's like, why would they want to come?
Why would they want to stay on a piece of land that doesn't have any infrastructure? Like it's ridiculous. It's like so obvious reality TV. Okay, guys, they want to be there, and they set some individuals, you'll see, but I don't know if you will see in the episode, but like they literally wanted to be there for the paycheck. We heard them saying, just one more week, I have to just be here.
Yeah.
I just need to get this. I just get this paycheck at the end of the week for being here for a whole week. It's like they didn't.
Tyler made a video about it. Tyler Covington made a video about like, this is my character. I'm here for the paycheck. Like,
that's so interesting.
It's so weird.
Wow, dude.
There is also the point of like, so it's like, why would they want to be there? I forget, because we live like this so often, that I forget how life-changing it is for somebody, even when it's just a group of people in an empty field living in a certain like lifestyle. And I think Heather's response and reaction to everything really made me see like, oh wow, like this is actually life-changing for her. And I'm like, oh, so it's there's something about what we're doing that's more in the feeling of it than is even in the infrastructure or the gardening or whatever, which I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, like they moved off grid now. They like live in a cabin in the woods. It's so like amazing.
Awesome. So amazing.
I feel like when you get confronted with that, like look at this fact that it's possible to live in a totally different way where you don't have to be going to your wage slavery job to rent your next meal every day. Like, you can just grow food in the forest and, like, be okay. And this is actually how humans evolved to live. And, like, this is what we should be doing. You can either react to that, like, this challenges my ideas about everything, and so yuck, right? Or you can be like, oh, wow, that sounds so much better.
Yeah.
You know? You kind of go in one of those two directions.
Right, exactly.
We're running out of battery, by the way, kids.
Okay, well then there's another thing that I need to talk about, and it's that scene at the very end where I am speaking about Tyler in my van. That like so much I'm pissed about how they portrayed, but that is a conversation. Like, those are things that I did say, and I want to explain a little bit about like, you know, it's hard to kind of imagine, like, it's like, you know, Tyler's this awesome guy, and I like love Tyler. I think he's awesome. And it's hard to imagine, why couldn't he join your cool club of people who dig holes all day? Like, I don't, you know, why would that even be a question? He's so nice, and he, you know, what would, you know, and it's something that people get really frustrated about at the garden a lot too, is, you know, understanding that it's like, you know, people come in for this trial period, and then we consents on them staying indefinitely beyond that, right? And then beyond that, the process for them leaving the land is what you saw with Naraya, 100% of the people agreeing for them to leave, which is a really hard thing to have to deal with. So it's a really important decision. And something I see a lot at the garden is, like, not a lot of people feel comfortable being the bad guy who says no, even if they really don't feel comfortable with the person. So it is something that I do often at the garden, is like go around and vibe check with people on how they feel about somebody. And it's not an ideal thing to do when the person is present. And that's why I think we were discussing a lot, like, what if we had everyone leave at 10 days, so then we could discuss without them here, and then we can invite them back, because we don't want to have to be whispering about people while they're here, making sure, you know, seeing how we feel. Like, it's a community discussion, and it's like not always something that you want to have in front of the person, because it could be hard for them. And so that's kind of what I was trying to do that day, was like go around and talk to everybody, and just kind of like, I don't want to put Tyler through a traumatizing counsel if some people don't feel comfortable with him staying. And yeah, it's like, I think hard for people who haven't lived in community to understand, like, the how big of a decision it is to agree to live with someone, work with someone, have them be around your kids, have them be, you know, whatever. It's just, it's a big decision. And
I think they're gonna portray you and I in conflict about this.
We were,
which is totally not true.
No, we weren't.
No, I don't think so.
Like, I guess we weren't. Like, I remember you kind of helped me see, like, kind of get clarity on the situation, because I was like, maybe everybody has to leave. Maybe everybody should leave at 10 days. And you were like, no, I don't think that's that, you know.
Well, and my big thing is, like, it seemed very obvious to me exactly what the show was going to be. And I was like, everyone thinks this is going to be a show about how do you build intentional communities. No, this is going to be a show about Tyler and friends visit the commune and how do people treat them. And everybody's like, that's not what it's going to be. And I'm like, it's 100% what it's going to be. Think about it.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, this is going to follow all of us for the rest of our lives, and be how we're depicted is how are we treating Tyler. So, like, he doesn't want to live here. Like, let him stay, right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to look like assholes.
Yeah.
But also, like, there was multiple times where, like, he would come up to me and say something that felt very concerned. Like, I don't know, I'm really scared. I don't know what's going on. And then I'd be like, it's fine. They're going to vote you to stay. It's not going to be a big deal. Like, there's a million ways it can happen. It doesn't make any sense for, like, part of the production crew to have this rule applied to them. Other people, it doesn't apply to them. It's like, nobody's talking about Block, who's been here for weeks, you know.
Yeah. It was so strange figuring out those boundaries. I would
see, like, there's cameras hiding under stuff looking at me when I'm saying that. And I'm like, are we on camera right now? I didn't say that's okay. And it's like, it was very sneaky towards the end. They sort of, like, took the mask off of, like, being very surreptitious with, like, trying to get the soundbite.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what there was a guy who came in near at the end who was this different guy, and he was like the more gun ho guy. He came in at the end, the last
More
few
than Block?
days. It wasn't Block, which is funny.
You left before this
You
guy
left,
came. Yeah,
but it was
right
funny
at the
that Block came. They never told us about Block. We only met Annie, and then it's so crazy how they
I really hope they
cultivated
show
a trust.
the thing with Block and Zans in the council after Tyler.
end. I don't remember
I don't
that.
even remember.
We'll
I
see.
was like
We'll
crying
see.
laughing.
I don't remember it.
I'm sure they won't show it because he's not on the cast,
Yeah,
right? But like
yeah.
after the Tyler vote, Block this executive producer is like, I've also been here for more than 10 days. I want the community to consent on me to stay to continue working on production. And it's like, that's so stupid. First of all, like, this is going to turn into such a mess. But then immediately Zans is like, I blocked the process. And so the conversation is over about whether or not they can stay.
That's so funny.
And effectively everyone can stay now because like we're not allowed to talk about it. And I started laughing so hard I was crying.
That was ridiculous. It was funny how I mean they were sneaky that day, but they did like genuinely catch something that I do, which is talk. Like it's like that is something, you know, and it's like the intentions are good, but like it is, I don't know, that is the and another
I'm
thing.
100% on board with backchanneling. I think backchanneling is a very important part of building consensus because you don't want people to be performing for their clique when they're having the conversation. You want to already have people on board or not, and then you
Right.
don't want to even bring it up because then there's no reason to have this big performative fight about it. Like if people aren't going to agree, then like let's not even talk about it.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what and it's interesting to know that boundary between gossip and important community conversation. Like at the garden sometimes too, I'm like, okay, right now, like we are having a necessary conversation that we need to have to keep ourselves safe, to understand how people feel about something. And sometimes I'm like, now we're just talking shit, you know, like it is
It's just values alignment. It's the same difference between leadership and manipulation. The only difference is whether you agree with what they want. It's the same with channeling versus gossip. Do you agree with them or not? That's the only difference. It's the same thing.
And I did the same thing with Naraya too. Like I saw a lot of the community, of course myself, but they didn't portray so much more of the community would not fine with her being there either. And I did I did a run around the whole land, like you know, like saying, you know, maybe this is enough, you know, like we need to do something about this now. And everyone was like, yeah, not like some people were
Almost
like,
everyone.
yes, of course. And then like some people were like, you know, she is, I am like friendly with her. I wouldn't ideally want her to go, but I don't see any other way that we're going to be able to come together as a community with her still being here, because she was actively turning people against each other and different things. And that's why I got so frustrated, because like in the whole consensus of her leaving, it was like, it was depicted in such a weird way where like with Zans and Tom had this comment which was like 3 hours into the conversation, but we already talked about this and that. But the newest episode was even crazier, CJ. I gotta ask you, mate.
The next one?
Well, the new one that just happened, as a guy who, as a fool.
Before we move on to that, I just wanted to say I disagreed with you at the time, but I think I agree with you now in retrospect, because I felt like you should have gotten them on board before you moved against her, but you couldn't have, because nobody realized how many people were so upset with her behavior, and I don't think we could have. There just is no way to show that without everyone talking about it.
Yeah.
And once everyone realized, like, wow, she has really hurt a lot of people in a lot of ways, that we're not going to fix that. This is a waste of time. She needs to go.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't think we could have gotten to that realization without the conversation.
Right. Yeah. And you only really see the people that have microphones on talking about it, but there's actually a lot of. I remember Sarah's kids and all these people being like, "We are really upset about her." Yeah.
Yeah. So, and me. I mean, I spoke out against her too.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's saying?
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to say about
we're on 7% battery.
Okay.
And we can't plug it back in. That's what I'm saying.
Dang.
So we got to be quick.
Okay, I wanted to make the point. I also, because I love Tyler. Tyler's awesome. And I feel bad about calling him inauthentic. And I think that that also came a little bit from, realizing like the show is one plot line to us that we are, and then there's this other plot line that's happening that is like, people are being interviewed about whether or not we're a cult. And you see all these scenes where Tyler is like going off and talking about whether or not we are cults to his wife. And that wasn't something that we were necessarily aware of, and I don't blame him for it now. I understand like he came in to play this certain role, and that makes complete sense, how that all
Yeah.
happened. But I think that maybe that is where a little bit of that came from also, of that feeling of like,
Yeah.
is something going on here, and why it was so hard to trust, because there was actually things happening that were sneaky,
Yeah. And in retrospect, I think it's easier for us to see which scenes were scripted, like which scenes were authentic Tyler and which things were character Tyler.
Yeah, where they
and
were
that makes
like,
it so much more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like 90% of what happened with those people was real, but 90% of what they're showing is the 10% that was scripted.
yeah,
And so like the real person is totally different than the character that you're seeing in the show, which makes it like a whole super complex emotional, like how do you separate those things from each other?
it's actually
It's
something
hard.
I think when I watched reality TV shows, where I'm like, it seems like they hate each other on TV, but then like on Instagram, it seems like they're all best friends. And like, it's
Yeah.
probably like the same with us right now, where I'm like, but it seems like we're all like BFF with Tyler online. It's like, yeah, because we live with him for, it's like an undefined amount. Yeah.
And that there is the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And sorry we had to cut it short. It just randomly cut off. This technology is very new to us, and we're still trying to figure out, these versions are free or paid, or, we're still figuring out these mics. We need to send people mics, all this stuff. If you want to help support the podcast, become better and not cut, you can. You can support us through Cash App and Venmo. All the links are in the description. Thank you very much, and see you next time.